Hello everyone. I would like to first inform you all that your usual professor is unfortunately sick today. They've asked me to fill in for them. My name is Bridgette Jasinski, and I will be kicking off the sociology of gender for you. Before we begin, I have to ask that everyone take a moment and think about what they feel they might already know about gender. Next, I want you to consciously commit to being open-minded as we dive into what this course is all about. A lot of what we learn may contradict things you have been told your whole life are undeniable truths. In order to get the most value out of your experience with this course and truly engage, it is essential to keep an open mind and let your perspectives on things change as you see fit. Now let's get started. Your usual professor left for me a few questions that might be helpful for us to begin with. They are: what is gender? Are there any real gender differences? How does the complexity of gender organize our lives and institutions? Throughout this course, we are going to address these overarching questions. Though these questions might seem easy to answer, there is a lot more that goes into gender than you might anticipate. And that is what this course is going to make you assess. These big questions represent underlying themes that you'll be able to see in upcoming readings, lecture videos, and supplemental materials as well. To begin, I'm going to offer a little insight on what these questions actually address. Well, let's take a look at question 1. What is gender? Well, we may feel inclined to say that gender is whether or not we are male or female based on the reproductive organs we were born with. This is the first of many misknowledges this course is going to address. First and foremost, biological sex and gender are not synonymous. Biological sex is based on the reproductive organs someone is born with, while gender is which sex someone chooses to or not to identify as. However, even when it comes to something seemingly factual like biological sex, things can be more complex than we think, and even stray outside of the male and female binary. For instance, Chapter 2 of your Gender, Ideas, Interactions, Institutions textbook discusses 2 instances where, at the very stem of biological sex, the chromosome, this is the case. The first example of this is Klinefelter syndrome. Those who have this condition are biologically male, but as opposed to having XY chromosomes, they have XXY. This results in the production of little to no sperm, reduced muscle mass, enlarged breasts, minimal body hair, and reduced levels of testosterone. A second instance is Turner syndrome. This is a condition where a woman is born with just one X chromosome as opposed to the usual XX chromosomes. These women tend to be short with stocky features like wide shoulders and a webbed neck. They have higher rates of obesity and most are infertile. Those who have these conditions or one similar are referred to as intersex. These conditions, which you will focus on in week 3, are just one side to factors that go against our social construct of a gender binary. You'll become very familiar with what a social construct is this semester, but to clarify for today, a social construct is an idea that a society or culture has cultivated and implemented. This idea is consequently perceived as an undeniable truth, though actual facts may override these perceptions, just like with our first example here of the gender binary. These examples bring about an important point that questions the validity of our social constructs. If, on the biological level, sex does not even fit into the gender binary, then would it not make sense, when it comes to gender identity, for there to be people who don't fit this mold either? You will explore the effects of social constructs and the ways they can inhibit members of our society this semester. These discoveries may give the need to recognize the falseness of the binary a lot of agency. But, as many will likely argue, for those of us who do choose to have a gender identity that corresponds to our biological sex, there are definite differences between us. At least so it seems. This points directly to our next question. Question 2. Are there any real gender differences? Well, the answer many might say to this question is yes. As you will learn this semester, gender is something that is performed, and the ways in which we perform it have historical and cultural implications and influences. For today, let's start small and keep going with the theme of how, even biologically or naturally, the gender binary seems to lack the factual agency our society gives it. The first claim many might make to validate the differences between males and females is that of appearance. However, Lady Gaga shows us here that gender is a performance. Here, she is posing as her male alter ego. In this photo, she is posing as herself, a female. As you can see simply based on these photographs, it is not so difficult to blur the line of gender. To quote Chapter 4, sociologists use the phrase doing gender to describe the ways in which we actively obey and break gender rules. Gender rules are instructions for how to appear and behave as a man or a woman. However, based on physical build and ability, some still may try to qualify true differences between males and females. However, quote, just as men can live in ways that leave their arm muscles small, regardless of their biological predisposition, what women do with their muscles is also dependent on their societies. Textbook page 54. This is explained in Chapter 3 with the example of women in marathons. Women were excluded for nearly 100 years, giving men plenty of time to grow much faster. When women were finally allowed to compete, they were slower than men because their bodies were largely untrained. However, over the years, their bodies improved, and so did their speed, at a rate far more impressive than that of men. While men took 30 years to shave 30 minutes off of their time, men took just 5. While our society seems to settle with the idea that men and women are cognitively or intellectually equal, Chapter 3 explores this as well. This chapter discusses the impact that social and cultural norms on which gender is supposed to excel mathematically can have. Quote, there is a strong correlation between gender differences in math ability and the level of gender inequality in a country. The differences diminish and then disappear as men and women become more equal. Textbook page 41. Unfortunately, as you will discover more throughout this semester, these perceptions on how males and females should perform their gender most often inhibit women. However, as you'll also learn, these social constructs on gender restrict both males and females. What's more, these negative impacts spread into all parts of life, which leads us to our third big question for this semester. Question 3. How does the complexity of gender organize our lives and institutions? Social constructs pertaining to gender penetrate our institutions without exclusion, as you will learn in weeks 9 and 11, 12 and 13, and 14. The complexity of gender plays a big role in our places of work, politics, families, occupation, hobbies, and education in a myriad of ways. Given that this big question for this semester is one that is extremely involved and has the most depth, we will focus on one small part of it for today. Since this is a class, it makes sense for us to start with addressing the way gender influences education. As you will discover in the supplemental material for week 9, gender penetrates the education system in a way that affects both educators and students. The supplemental video you will watch shows the correlations between gender of educators and the age groups they are teaching. You will come to discover that these statistical variances have much to do with the way gender norms penetrate the institution of education. You will start to learn more about these gendered effects and the way they greatly impact our lives and institutions during week 9. However, Chapter 14 offers an excellent insight to these institutionalized problems by stating, quote, because institutions reflect not only gender inequality, but all social inequities, our participation often means being advantaged by virtue of someone else's disadvantage. Textbook page 348. I am well aware that this is a lot to digest for one lesson, so I will end the introduction there. While this is only a brief insight on what this course is all about in all of its complexity, I hope this information has you excited and curious to learn more. I look forward to hearing from your professor about all of your progress. I wish you the best of luck and welcome to the Sociology of Gender.